largest slave trading communities in the United States. Enslaved people would be paraded up Commerce Street to slave warehouses and slave depots. The city's slave market was at the Artesian Basin, now known as Court Square. Enslaved people of all ages were auctioned along with livestock, standing in line to be inspected. Public posters advertising the sale of slaves included gender, age, skill, complexion, owner's name, and price. Slavery in America traumatized and devastated millions of people. Husbands and wives, parents and children could not protect themselves from being sold away from each other. Enslaved families were separated as an owner's or auctioneer's whim, never to see each other again. The domestic slave trade separated nearly half of all enslaved people from their spouses and parents. In 1833, the Alabama legislature banned free black people from residing in the state, meaning that enslavement was the only legally authorized status for African Americans. Even as the Civil War raged, slave trading in Montgomery flourished well into the mid-1860s. After the Confederacy's surrender in 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment, which prohibited slavery nationwide except as a punishment for crime. But in many former slave states, slavery did not end. It simply evolved. Southern whites, angry after losing the war, targeted black people who were largely abandoned by the federal government in the 1870s. For decades, black men, women, and children were tortured, terrorized, and killed by mobs and violent lynchings, oppressed by a system of racist laws and customs. For another 100 years, black people were racially segregated, denied the right to vote, education, and basic dignity. They were humiliated, beaten, killed for minor offenses or for protesting. The civil rights movements of the 1950s and 60s helped to end legally authorized racial segregation, but racial bias still persists. Today, a presumption of guilt is assigned to many people of color who are disproportionately arrested, convicted of crimes, and sent to prison. African Americans are 6 times more likely to be sentenced to prison for the same crime as a white person. 1 in 3 black males born today can expect to spend time in prison during his lifetime. Police violence against black people is so epidemic that civil rights demonstrations have shut down cities across the U.S. as thousands of people march to protest police brutality. Many states celebrate the era of slavery with Confederate holidays and by honoring the defenders and architects of slavery while ignoring the history of enslavement. The Equal Justice Initiative believes that racial bias remains a serious problem and is a direct and lasting legacy of American slavery and our failure to deal with a history of racial injustice. The Equal Justice Initiative seeks to foster an honest conversation about the legacy of slavery, about mass incarceration, and racial inequality and how it still affects millions of people today. We can confront and overcome bias and discrimination. Please join us in this conversation so that we can move forward together.
So as we get the next little clip going, just jot down some things that you noticed about that clip. Like, what were the messages? What was it really trying to tell you? And then there's another short clip that's actually a lot shorter than that one, and I want you to do the same thing.
I wonder, is that the same one who did the Jay-Z animation that was similar to that one?
I think so.
It looks like it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get apples after one of these days.
Yeah, well.
This is Collateral Consequences in 60 seconds. We usually think of criminal justice in 2 steps, crime and punishment. But these 2 steps can become a revolving door when we ignore what happens to people leaving prison. Difficulty finding a job is just one of the collateral consequences that makes it hard for ex-offenders to re-enter society and reduces public safety. Like this father, with little education and few professional skills, who thought the only way to support his sick daughter after he lost his job was dealing drugs. After prison, he wanted to get his life on track, but some employers were nervous about his criminal record, and some of the jobs he could do were required special licenses he couldn't get because of his record. Returning to crime seemed like his only option. You and I probably don't agree with that decision, but one mistake during a rough patch in his life shouldn't lead to sentence after sentence. And we aren't safer. Prison has helped turn this man into a career criminal. Successfully reintegrating ex-offenders will truly improve public safety. We can start by encouraging businesses to hire ex-offenders by limiting the legal responsibility they face for doing so.
Charles Koch.
Okay, so with that, somebody's noticed one difference in the video is so creative, right?
Yeah.
You missed the whole thing. Oh, we'll talk about it. So just to sort of moving from those videos, can anyone just share with me some things that you noticed in the first video? Anybody willing to share? I don't mind. Okay.
13th Amendment, which is, I'm part of Millions for Prisoners, and that's, our main purpose is to abolish the 13th Amendment because of the slavery clause. So the slavery, wasn't really abolished at all, it was just revised.
Right, and your name, please?
Anna Murillo.
Anna Murillo, thank you so much for sharing that. So, right, that was something that was mentioned in the first video, the 13th Amendment, which, if you're familiar with it, says that slavery is illegal, right, unless someone is convicted of a felony. That's what it says. So, literally, it's telling us in the Constitution that slavery is okay as long as somebody's been convicted of a felony in this country, right? We have a question or comment. Please say your name first and then.
My name is Mark Slaughter. It's a comment or quote. Pretty much in regards to the 13th Amendment, I was watching Hulu and I noticed that they had a new show called The 13th. And it really gives you a lot of in-depth information from history up until now about the 13th Amendment. So if
You said there's a show out, or are you talking about the movie?
A documentary.
It's a documentary.
Right, by Ava DuVernay, right? There's this great movie that come out, which strategically, if you notice, she released through Netflix, because there's another film out right now talking about some of the resistance that we need to learn about that came from oppressed people, the Birth of a Nation. And although there's controversy behind the director or the creator and all that, he released through the movie theaters, right? He had to buy seats at screens, and not as many people are going to end up seeing the Birth of a Nation as we'll see 13th, because how Ava noticed that the industry sort of blocked when they put Selma out, right? They didn't want a lot of people to see these films that talk about our resistance story, right? So anyhow, yeah, the 13th is a good one that'll highlight those things. And anything else folks noticed in that first video? So what I wanted to, sure.
I noticed just to contrast the two, one was more about an economic impact, the Coke, and I can understand that, and the other one was more about the people part of it.
Right, absolutely. And so in that first video, in talking about the people, the first video makes sure that we recognize the root cause to incarceration, right? It talks about the reason that there is incarceration. It talks about the legalities behind incarceration as they're linked to slavery, right? And then the second video, again, they're talking about the economic parts of incarceration. But something very important that you should recognize, anybody pay attention to the language that was used in that second video?
The term ex-offender,
Right on. Your name, please?
Devin.
Devin.
I just noticed it because it was like the way that they were talking about the people involved, and I just kind of the underlying impression seemed really different.
Absolutely. So the language in that one, they're saying ex-offender, career criminal, and they're making those sort of labels, right? They control the dominant paradigm and what people actually perceive, right? Through media outlets, through stuff like this, but that language and just labeling folks, because we don't believe that we're criminals. We don't call ourselves ex-offenders, right? We call ourselves people. I'm Amber Rose, right? And so those labels that are used to define us were really expressed in that second film there. And it's important to notice the difference so that we start to pay attention to paradigms. We'll have one more comment and we'll move on to the next slide.
In that first video, you didn't mention anything about the legal ruling. Was it in 1843, 1847?
Which legal ruling?
Where it made a distinction between the black people.
Dred Scott case.
Yeah. where a black person was enslaved for life, but they, like indentured servants they had at the time, but after 7 years they were free. I didn't see, that was a sort of a bridging type of period.
Right,
That defined, you know, what happened later.
Absolutely. It's a period where racial bias was established judicially,
Yes.
right? It's where racial bias actually started to become part of the law, and that all happened around the time of the Atlantic slave trade because there was a system that was set up, and certain folks, black folks, were intended to be the capital, right? There were capitalists, and black folks were the actual capital. So absolutely, that's the root cause, and that's what we're talking about when we say the root cause to the incarceration issue.
And the other thing was, you mentioned the language, by law, the black people were chattel. You mentioned something, they were auctioned at the same type of market where they auctioned the livestock, but chattel, it was a determining factor in how they were treated later. And this was codified in the law, so I didn't see anything about that.
Well, it was just a short clip to sort of open up these conversations where folks like you, I'm sorry, your name?
Levon Hill.
Levon Hill, thank you, Ms. Hill. So that was a short clip to get our minds going, right? Into thinking, into looking back into that far, long tunnel of our history and trying to understand the issues. So we appreciate you for elaborating on what was missed in the clip, but I think it was a good clip to get us to the point where we realize there is a root issue. There is a reason things are this way. It is intentional and systemic, and so that's the idea for that. So this slide here, I just want you to take a look, right? When we talk about the issues, of course, we're here, as all of us are none, and other organizations because we want to correct that issue, right? We want actual justice. And so when you look at these two pictures, can you share with me just what you noticed about the people in the square on the right, and then what's going on in the photo to the left, or the left and right?
It looks like they're addressing some issues over here where Royce is at, that look like there's some type of press conference. There's some issues, maybe some demands or something, informing about the people.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah,
See?
there seems to be protests on this out here in education. They're on this out here, school.
Right on. So what I did, absolutely, that's what I wanted you to notice about the two pictures, right? So in the photo to my right, you have folks that are sort of sitting on this side of the table, right? Folks that are being told something, or folks that are being given something, or folks that are being offered something. They're on the receiving end of that situation, right? And then in the photo to my left, you have folks who are behind the mic, folks who are controlling the conversation, folks who are handling the situation, right? And so that's what we have, the idea when we have service providing meets community building. Because the idea is that when you give folks services that are needed in order to address some of these racial bias, these oppressions that come from racial biases, when you do services to address those things, like sort of what's happening through policy in Prop 47, right? When a law is written for the people that addresses the war on drugs, that criminalize a lot of folks in poor communities of color, and then you say, well, we need relief from that because it was wrong. We were punishing people way too severely for things that maybe they should have had some rehabilitation for, maybe they should have gotten counseling, maybe they should have gone to treatment, right? And so when you give folks services, that's a prime opportunity for organizations, grassroots organizations, organizations that are in this movement, to reach in, connect with folks, and build community, right? I want to just see it by a show of hands, how many in here are formerly incarcerated, have a prior conviction? So we're in a room, right, and there's so many differences that we may have, but a commonality that we have, one of them is that we have a criminal record, right? Secondly, what we want to say is that who in here knows someone, is personal friends with someone, or has a family member who's been formerly incarcerated or convicted, and that's even more. That's almost everyone in the room raises their hand. So that's our commonality, right? And when we, through service providing, introduce people to that commonality, get people to pay attention to that, we can build community that really moves to change things. Next slide. So there's a space provided in your workbook, and that's a space for you to jot down some things that you've experienced as collateral consequences. Do we all know what collateral consequences means? So collateral consequences are issues that are actually consequences that happen after your actual consequence, right? After the actual punishment, these are things that follow as punishment because of that same issue that you had, right? These collateral consequences. And so, just a little information, there are 43,000 collateral consequences, barriers that people meet after a conviction in the United States. 43,000 opportunities that people with prior convictions have to miss out on. In the state of California, where we all live, there are 2,300 collateral consequences that we face. 2,300 barriers to gainful opportunities that you have to continue to face after you've given that time to society that you were supposed to have given. So that's just a space for you to write down some things about collateral consequences. If you've been affected, is anybody in here besides me been affected? Anyone willing